Chapter 23 covers server-side and client-side scripting. And here is just an illustration about, how the systems are set up. Okay, so of course, we need hardware. We need the devices that we touch so we can install the software like an operating system, like Linux, Windows, or Mac. And then above that, you will need, and this is for having a web page, you will need a HTTP server, or a web server. And then a database will hold information, and then you can have a scripting language, or you need a scripting language to get the information from the database. So I actually did a search to illustrate what it's basically talking about. So, and all I really did was just a search on web server. And I just clicked on one of these. And basically, and a lot of these images are pretty close to the same. But if you see this image here, at the very left, you have the clients, which are the devices that you look at, and kind of ignore this text here because that I'm really just focusing on this image because we don't need all that stuff. Okay, so these clients here, they are the devices that every user is using to access web pages. So this can be a computer, laptop, cell phone, tablet, whatever. Then these people, or well, everybody connects to the internet to access information. And if you're surfing the internet, you're going to be accessing a web server. And just keep in mind that a web server is just like a regular PC, but it's going to be much more powerful because basically, with our PCs, only one person is generally using it. But when you talk about a web server, you're going to have a lot of people trying to access it all at the same time. So it's going to be more powerful. And it also has different software installed on it. So, you might have Windows or whatever is out there for Mac on your client PCs, but this web server is going to have some different software installed on it to say, hey, I'm a server and I can accept users accessing my content, because the web pages have to be stored somewhere. Now, if you're thinking about the web pages that we've created so far, we're really just creating HTML files that, well, anybody can use, but as long as you send them the file, because you don't have your files on some server where anybody can access it. You have to send that page, maybe email it to somebody or open it on a flash drive. Or you could actually save it on a shared drive and give somebody access to it. But anyway, but generally, when you create web pages, they need to be on a web server so many people can access it all at once, and this needs to be a more powerful computer. Now, when the user connects to the internet, and like it says here, it is true, because you might want to connect to a server, but one that you're already connected to on your own company. So your company's web server. So you might not even go out onto the internet. You just need to go to access this server. So anyway, you are the clients. You're accessing the network or a network. I'm sorry, the internet or a network. Then you're accessing a web server to access those web pages. And then you might need access to a database. And the web server is the one that determines whether you need to have access to the database. So why would you need access to a database? Well, if I sign out of my account here, you can see that, well, these two, we have my username and a password. Those are fields. Remember, we created forms. These are form fields to gather data from your user. And then we have a button here so that we can send the information. Now, before I go too much further, just remember that there's two fields here with information, and we send it using that button. So we send that information from the web server. And if you need to access data, like checking the username and password, that's when the data gets sent to the database so that it can be checked and confirmed. And then you have access to more information on the database, like, you know, if you're accessing your classes, now you have access to, or where you're looking at the data that's available in your classes. So, and there's a bit more to it too if you think about your classes, but I would say the more general you could think of it is like a bank account. So you fill out your username and password for a bank account, you submit it to the web server, then it goes into the database to confirm, and then through the web server, your bank account gets is available now on your client PC. And the database has all the different transactions that you've made on your bank account. So that is a more simple illustration of accessing data through a database. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so and just with that illustration, so of course the hardware, then there's an operating system, we have a web server or HTTP server, then and also too, if you think way back to how we set up web servers, you actually may have a website that doesn't even have a database or a scripting language. It may just be a server that displays pages. And you know, that's possible. You may not have to have an account to look at content. You know, maybe YouTube decides that they don't want to save your videos or save anything about you, so then you just don't have a login. All you do is just watch their videos. But they do have a database, and they do have a database for the videos that you have, that you've uploaded, or even that you saved on some list. And then we need the scripting language to be able to access the data that's on that database. And that's what we're looking at now, the scripting language to actually access that data. So once you go onto the website, like to log into your account, you fill out the form here with information, you hit sign in, then it gets sent to the database so we can display all your information for your classes. Okay, so scripting languages. So what are scripting languages? Well, there's many different scripting languages, but this particular book only mentions PHP and JavaScript. Now, basically it's just to illustrate the difference between the two. Now, this book has a bit of history about PHP, and I do recommend that you read the history about it. But what I want to focus on is the fact that PHP is the server-side language and JavaScript is the client-side language. Now, what does that mean? Well, if we go back into that illustration showing the server and the clients here, well, client side is, you know, the PCs that you're on or all the users are using, PC, tablet, phone. And then we have your server, where you actually access the web pages. Well, client side and server side. So client side would be the scripting that happens on the user's PC or on your PC. But if you were, in charge of the server at a company, the server side scripting will be on the server or run on the server. So client side, server side. And that's the difference between the two. That's what you have to remember, and it's pretty much in the name. It's the script that's going to happen on the client or script that's going to happen on the server. Okay, so what is the difference between the two, or what are the advantages? Well, when it comes to server side, which is PHP, the code that you write in programming happens on the server. And the reason for running it on the server, well, there's many different reasons for running information only on the server. So the advantages would be that code is hidden from the user, and it makes it secure. And if you think about it, the more you know about something, the easier it is to be hacked or, not secure, because maybe there's fields that you're using, or you're actually exposing how the server is set up. You want as much as you can hidden from everyone, so you're not, being attacked. So that's what's good about the server side. And also know that it reduces the workload on the user's computer. So your computer is not doing all the processing that happens, on the server. It happens on their server. It is a much more powerful computer, and it can handle it. But of course, as it says down here, and I don't have it highlighted, but the server may actually be overwhelmed as well. So if you're creating this web server and you can't handle how many users, and I'm sure you've experienced situations where maybe you couldn't access a website, or well, let's say the COVID vaccine. So many people were trying to get scheduled, but the computers just couldn't handle it, or their server couldn't handle it. So you didn't have access. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going to create your own server. And I do have to say that creating your own server will happen in the advanced web programming course. There's 3 different levels. There's the beginning, which is what you're taking now, then the intermediate, and then the advanced. And the intermediate, I may have already mentioned this, but you focus more on the programming, which is PHP and JavaScript. Well, that's if you take it with me. There are different computers that focus on different things, but I focus on PHP and JavaScript. Oh, and more stuff too, actually, but mostly those 2. So anyway, PHP is the server side. It happens on the server. And also think about the fact that there are some things, the programming is hidden from you, but sometimes you just don't want to see it, or you don't need to see it. Always remember that things that are downloaded takes more time. So if all the scripting was happening on your computer, then it would just make the loading so much longer. So it's kind of a benefit too. I would say it's definitely a benefit. Okay, let's see. Okay, so JavaScript would be the client side scripting. So that means that it's going to happen on the user's computer, or every time you access a web page, what's happening on your computer is the JavaScript, because it's the client side script. And the reason for using client-side scripts would be maybe to validate data before sending it to the user, adjusting the interface, and for doing other advanced features. So basically, you know that HTML, there are some fields that validate data. Like remember, if you create an input, and you say specifically that it's a type of email, it checks if it has the @sign. And if it doesn't, it already validates it. But, there's, other things that you may not already have part of HTML5. So you can validate data, or even like check if it's empty. If it's empty, well, then you tell the user, please fill out something in this form. So many different things. You can also adjust the interface. And I know that the assignment, you're not going to change the website by clicking on the buttons. You're just going to have a prompt that comes up. But you can create things about the website. You can change the background, or you can change CSS. You can add more HTML code. So lots of things you can do with JavaScript. I mean, even just think about the W3 schools page. Everything they do on that page, they're using HTML to create this page. And then they even have this section with HTML. You click try it yourself. This is still a web page that allows you to change code and run it here. So yeah, anything that you can do on the web, you can do. Well, anything you see done on the web, you can do that yourself. Okay, on a side note, just know that it's possible that somebody may have JavaScript disabled. So you may have JavaScript disabled. So definitely try one of the basic scripts that we have in the next chapter, or in chapter 34, and just make sure that it works before you do something complicated and you don't realize that it's disabled, and then you don't know why all of your code is not working. So definitely try it out first to make sure whether it's disabled or not, or if you have any issues. Okay. Well, and then of course you can, do a search to see how to enable which browser. Okay, and also another side note is that there is a misconception that Java and JavaScript are the same thing, but they're not. And here are some differences between the two. And I'm not going to go into that, so I'll leave it to you to go through. And I know that I made some changes here. I definitely crossed this out because it says, what's going to be happening in the book, and it's not really going to be happening for this class, so I just crossed them out. I will upload this this PDF in the course so you can have an updated version of what I crossed out. And I think I know that I found a couple of tiny errors, but I still crossed it out, and you'll see what I crossed out when I upload this PDF. Okay, this sentence here, last I want to cover, is that JavaScript is a lot like PHP. And to tell you the truth, so many different languages are very similar. So if you've already done Java, you've already done C++, and Python, there's still similar things. So even though there are different types of languages, some may be more difficult than others, there are still a lot of things that are very similar. But then there's those small changes in the syntax or how you write it, or there's, just additional things you need to know about a language. So they're all similar. There are things or structures that you use that are similar in all languages, but then there are some differences. Okay, so let me go ahead. So that was the server side and client side scripting. Remember, let me just go back here. Go back to this wonderful image. Remember client side and server side. You have JavaScript on your clients, then you have PHP on your server that will access the database and then provide the information through the server to the client. So pretty cool stuff. Alrighty. So let's go ahead and look at our next chapter. Now, I am going to go through this next chapter on the same video. And what's interesting is that, well, if you look at the, well, I'm going to go ahead and show the table of contents real quick on this book. This book that we have here, I just covered server-side and client-side scripting, but I'm going to skip the chapters on PHP because that's just a lot of content that we don't have time for. And we don't have a server or something that can simulate a server to use that code anyway. So I'm skipping down to chapter 34, or we'll be looking at JavaScript, but also know that this book will reference that you already know things because of the content that he covered here. But so you're going to see a lot where there's not much of an explanation. And that is why on the, if you go into the very first page in the modules for week 14, it actually has a list of the different sections that I want you to read from this W3 Schools website, because these are, you know, things that you need to know about programming. Now, if you already know about programming, because I know you may have already taken programming courses, then these might not be, you know, news to you, but just remember the syntax or the way that it's written could be different. So these are very helpful sections for you. The quiz for this week is only on chapter 34, so these aren't required for this week's quiz, but they are required for the last exam that we're taking. So it's still really good stuff. And always remember too that it's always great to go to this website. I know that it has a lot of ads, and even, you know, within the information there may be ads. So just be sure to skip those areas and just read the content that it has. Also, I want to point out that there are some pages, and it's not here, but there's some pages where there's a, you know, related sites or some links to click on. When I mention, you know, to read certain pages in this area, you don't have to click any links other than the try it yourself. Try it yourself, and then you go all the way to the bottom for the next button. So when I talk about the last exam for this class, it'll be only on these pages, not any secondary link from those pages. So you have a bit of a focus. I don't want you surfing throughout the entire internet and thinking that you might have questions on the exam. It's only on these particular pages, or at least the ones that I have listed here. And also know that we'll be adding a few more for next week that will be on the last exam. Anyway, okay, so let's talk about JavaScript syntax. Okay, and actually now I am going to be doing a bit of code. So let me get a little prepared or set up here. JavaScript syntax, and then we'll bring out our trusty notepad here. I have a simple page here, and all it has is the doc type, HTML. Always remember the open and close HTML, open and close head, open and close body, open and close title. And I do have a header, not always required, and then a heading. So this is a very basic page that I'm going to add JavaScript on. Okay, let me make this bigger. Hold on a second. Okay, so chapter 34 is about JavaScript syntax. It's a little bit different than PHP and other programming languages, or yeah, PHP and other programming, I guess programming languages. Okay, okay, but there are a lot of similarities, and you might see that as I go through here. Okay, so you know that we have tags in HTML, and we had tags for our cascading style sheets, but now we're going to create some tags for the JavaScript that we add, and it's really just script. So I'm going to go ahead and add script to my page. Okay, open and close, because all of the script goes inside. And well, that is a good question, or segue to the fact that I know that I had you putting the CSS in the head in particular, although you could have it within the body. And those were the style tags. You could have it in the body, but I wanted it in the head just to bring it all together. But just know that script is the same way. You can have a script section on the top and in the head, and then you can have a script section in the body. And you could have multiple ones too. But just remember that it's a good idea to keep them all together. So if you wanted a section on the bottom, well, then just put them all together in one section. And I do, since I'm already here and I see that there's a space in between body and HTML, I'm going to get rid of that, because remember that nothing will ever be in between here. I've seen people put a footer in between these two tags. A footer should go inside the body. So if you had a footer, be sure to put it inside the body. Okay. Nothing goes in between the closed body and the closed HTML, or in between the closed head and the open body. Okay, anyway, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so script. We have script tags, and I put it in the head just for now, and we might move it later, but I do have script tags, and it basically allows us to link to a file or to mark a section of our HTML file for code. And I'll show you that in a little bit. And just to kind of remind you is that, remember that cascading style sheets, although we only did inline and internal, which are both on the HTML page, we could have created an external cascading style sheet and just referred to it. Well, you can do that also using you can also do that for a JavaScript file. So on the bottom here, you see that there is a script. It actually has the source, src, and it has an absolute link to the JavaScript file. And you see that JavaScript files end with a JS. And that's if you're going to do it external. You do not need to do that in this class or on this assignment. Okay, it mentions here that you can put the script tags in any section, in the head, in the body, both. You might want to put it where you want your output to be. So just keep that in mind. But of course, always remember that it needs to be organized in some way. Somebody else is very likely to be reading your code, including your instructor. And we want it easy to read. Okay, and it mentions here that script tags can be used for more than just JavaScript. So as you see in this link here, or even just this part here, it says script type equals text JavaScript. So if you're using different scripts or you just want to be specific on what you're using, be sure to put JavaScript. But just know that you don't have to. It could actually just be script because JavaScript is the default language of web pages. Okay. I am actually going to stop the recording here so we will have a separate video for the actual code.